I can barely recall my early childhood, as though it belonged to another life, another time, when the sun scorched the land of Jambia, my homeland. My family was large and we lived among dusty roads and tropical trees. The days blurred together, passing by until the war came. As a child, I always found refuge in the branches of an old tree not far from our house. My brothers attended lessons in an open-air classroom beneath a canopy, while I, as a very young girl, preferred climbing that enormous tree, hiding among its branches and watching their lessons from afar. Up there, I felt as though I became part of nature, sensing a new, invisible connection between myself and something greater. When the sun began to set, the birds would flock to the tree as if called by some unseen force, filling the air with their songs. Everything seemed to freeze when they began to sing, and I listened with bated breath. One day something changed. I felt a strange tension in the air, and drawn by the unknown, I climbed higher into the branches. Around me, the birds gathered in such numbers that they surrounded me like an impenetrable cloud of feathers and sound. And then I saw it, a portal opening right before me. It shimmered against the backdrop of the setting sun, and I felt a strange sensation ignite inside me, a mix of fear and curiosity. Without thinking, I followed the birds and stepped into the unknown. The world I entered felt like a dream, vibrant and magical. The tree I once hid in looked completely different here. It glowed with a radiant green, each branch woven from light, and wondrous fruits I had never seen before grew upon them. Around me, waterfalls roared, their waters crystal clear. Everything here felt alive, and every movement of nature seemed to hold a deeper meaning that I could not yet grasp. Time flowed differently in this place. Morning began as night fell in Jambia. I vaguely remember how I spent that day waiting for the portal to reopen so I could return home. When it finally did, my mother was furious, forbidding me from climbing the tree again, especially at dusk. But even her anger couldn't erase the memory of that world where the birds lived freely and where I felt a part of something magical. A year passed and the world around me changed. War engulfed Jambia. I still remember the day I lost everything. My mother, my brothers, they perished, leaving me alone, lost in a whirlwind of fear. Everything was crumbling around me, and in desperation, I ran to the only place that ever brought me peace, the old tree, hoping once again to find refuge in its branches. The birds gathered above me, their cries rising above the chaos of explosions and fire. And when evening fell, the portal opened once more. Without hesitation, I ran through it, not daring to look back, and found myself in the world of birds again. But this time it was no longer the paradise I remembered. The once mighty living tree had vanished, leaving only a charred scar on the earth. I tried to gather the wounded birds to help them, but my strength was fading. By the river, where the crystal-clear water still flowed, I wept, and exhausted, I fell asleep. When I woke, I was inside a bright house that floated in the air. The house belonged to the birds, intelligent beings, wise and kind. They had saved me and brought me into their world, a sanctuary untouched by war, a place where conflict had never existed. The birds communicated through songs and gestures, their stories and knowledge passed down through music. Years passed. I grew up among them, learning to sing and dance as they did. I came to realize that I could never return to Jambia. The portal had disappeared, destroyed along with the tree. But one day the birds led me to an old woman named Grace. She taught me to read and write in the human language, a new tongue I had never known before. Grace shared incredible legends about humans, angels who once lived among the birds as well. Life in the world of birds was truly magical, full of wonders. It was there that I learned to listen to silence, to see the essence of things, and to discern truth from lies. It was also there that I learned how to craft wings to soar in the sky like the birds. Grace taught me how to weave feathers into lightweight structures, how to feel the air and command it. Flying brought a sense of absolute freedom. Yet with each new beat of my wings, my thoughts drifted back to Jambia, to my home. One question lingered in my heart. Had anyone from my family survived? Despite the warnings of Grace and the birds, I decided to return. It took a long time for a new portal tree to grow, reconnecting our worlds. But when I set foot on the soil of Jambia again, my heart sank. My homeland was unrecognizable. Where my village once stood, cold gray buildings now towered. The streets were filled with people, but they were strangers. No faces I recognized. I wandered through the city, searching desperately for any trace of my family, but no one knew anything. No one remembered those who had lived there before. I roamed the streets for what felt like an eternity until I heard music. In the distance, street musicians played. They were singing and dancing, and without thinking, I asked if I could join them. The moment I began to sing, something within me shifted. My voice echoed through the streets, carried by the wind, and suddenly, everything around me grew still. My songs were otherworldly, unfamiliar to this place, yet somehow deeply resonant with the people. As I sang, people stopped in their tracks, their eyes filled with tears. I could sense something changing within them. The crowd grew, and as more gathered, my voice only strengthened, but the authorities of Jambia took notice. The police arrived, ordering everyone to disperse, but no one wanted to leave. There were notes in my voice that stirred the deepest emotions, even in the hardest of hearts. For a brief moment, all enmity was forgotten, but soon chaos erupted. Tear gas filled the air and people fled in panic. In the confusion, someone nearly died trying to protect me. I woke in a prison hospital, my breath shallow, my head throbbing with pain. My memories of what had happened were fragmented. I could only recall the moment when panic overtook the crowd, how I fell, and the sensation of something striking my head. Less than an hour passed before officials came to see me. A man and a woman, their faces cold, their voices stern. They questioned me, but I could barely respond. I hadn't spoken Jambian since childhood, and the words came haltingly. I tried to explain that I was searching for my family, but the more I spoke, the deeper their frowns grew. Something in my words unsettled them, and as I continued, their displeasure only intensified. When I switched to the language Grace had taught me, hoping it would help me express myself more clearly, their anger became palpable. They looked at me with disdain, and I was forbidden to sing. They left me alone for several days. I lay on the narrow hospital bed staring at the gray, lifeless walls, wondering if I would ever see the sky again. This place felt so foreign, so cold. Every sound outside the door echoed in my heart with dread, and every footstep in the hallway made me flinch. Dark thoughts crept into my mind, thoughts that this might be the end, that I would remain trapped here forever among these unfeeling people. In my dreams, I felt my wings again. I soared above the prison, flew over the gray streets, and ahead of me, the Jambia I remembered unfolded, bright, bathed in sunlight. In that dream, I regained my freedom, and when I awoke, I realized something. I was no longer the lost girl I had been before. At that moment, I didn't yet realize that my voice had already spread across the world. My songs, recorded by random passersby, were changing people's lives, starting with my own. Videos of my performance had gone viral. and news about me sparked genuine sympathy. In the distant land of the free, there were people who wanted to help. They were particularly intrigued by how I spoke their language better than my own. Young musicians connected to Anna Landro, the daughter of influential presidential candidate Eldrick Landro, reached out to her for assistance. Anna, in turn, persuaded her father to intervene. Together, they devised a clever plan to trade me for another prisoner, fabricating a story that I was a citizen of the land of the free. Thus, I was rescued and smuggled out, where I was welcomed with open arms. Almost immediately, they asked me to perform for those who had orchestrated my rescue. I sang for them, and once again, my song stirred a flood of emotions. People wept and smiled as though my voice touched the deepest parts of their souls. A video of my performance spread like wildfire, and suddenly, Eldrick Landro's campaign, previously struggling to gain traction, began to soar in the polls. His team quickly realized that I was an opportunity, a key to furthering his political ambitions. I could sense it. Landro wasn't pleased to be drawn into this, but his ambition overruled his caution. He ordered that I be kept under strict surveillance, monitoring my every move. Though I was housed in a luxury hotel, the walls around me felt like a prison, enclosing me in a world where I was still a stranger. The only ray of light in my confinement was Anna. Like me, she was lonely. We bonded quickly, though I rarely spoke of my past. Meanwhile, Landro, eager to capitalize on my influence, wanted to feature me in his campaign speeches, hoping to draw the attention of thousands across the country. My music, complex and unfamiliar, was difficult for most to accompany. But there was one exception: Joshua, a young composer who had invented a unique instrument for microtonal music. He became my companion and friend, and together we prepared for our first major concert. The anticipation was immense, and thousands gathered to hear my songs. On stage, I felt free as if I had returned to the world of birds. My voice reached into the hearts of every person in the audience. They sang with me, and for that brief moment, the world seemed united. But as I glanced at Landro in the front row, I saw fear in his eyes. He plugged his ears, afraid he might lose control of his emotions, of himself. It was then that I began to understand that my voice was more than just music. It was a power, one that no one, not even Landro, could control. At first, for Landro, it seemed like just another concert organized by his team. He had always craved attention, but when he saw the admiration people had for me, his jealousy quickly turned into fury. We were bound together in this shared event, but his ego demanded that he too be part of the adulation. Yet no matter what he did, the world continued to overlook him. They saw me, they heard my songs, but to them it was as though he didn't exist. When Landro finally realized that no one paid him any attention, his rage boiled over. Anna and his team bore the brunt of his fury, and I was locked away in the tall hotel like a bird in a cage. Was it punishment, or was it fear? Fear that I might escape, fly away from all of this. Yet even behind those closed doors, I was not truly alone. Joshua remained by my side, helping me prepare for future concerts, listening to my thoughts, and perhaps without even realizing it, falling in love. When I suggested that we make large wings like the ones I once wore in the land of birds, Joshua didn't question me. That night, as the city slept, we opened the window and I showed him how to fly. Under the light of the moon, we soared out of the hotel, the wind carrying us and our wings. It wasn't just an escape, it was a miraculous flight, witnessed by the entire world. Videos of our flight flooded the news outlets instantly. Once again, the world was talking about me, and Landro was left in the shadows. This time, though, I didn't care. I had found my wings again. but Landro couldn't tolerate the silence surrounding his name. His team devised another scheme. They wanted me to take him on my next flight during a concert. The plan was simple. We would fly together, with Landro wearing the wings I had gifted him, and in that moment, people would see not just me, but him too. Joshua was outraged. He saw right through Landro. His true goal was power, veiled under a pretense of good intentions. Joshua warned me, and I began to think. In the land of birds, there was no room for lies, but I had learned how once cunning hunters had evolved and become truthful through their songs. I knew that songs were the key. That's when I conceived a plan, one I kept secret. When the next concert arrived, thousands gathered beneath the open sky. I sang and flew as planned, with Landro beside me, waiting for his moment. I handed him the wings, just as promised, and we soared together. But this time something was different. Joshua had disabled the sound suppression in Landro's headphones. Now, Landro could hear every note of my song. I watched as his expression shifted, first to surprise, then to confusion. The song was breaking through his defenses, the walls he had built over years of deceit. Under the influence of my song, which carried the magical power of truth, honest people grew more confident, while those who had lived in lies began to realize the destructiveness of their falsehoods. And then Landro broke. His emotions spilled over and he began to speak, not his usual politician's rhetoric, polished and crafted to conceal his true intentions. No, this was a confession. His words revealed the truth he had hidden from everyone, including himself. The crowd fell silent. It was as if time had stopped, and people realized that the politician they had followed was nothing more than a liar. But what surprised me most was the crowd's reaction. They didn't shout or accuse him. Instead, they turned inward, reflecting on their own lives. People recalled their own moments of dishonesty, small lies, betrayals, omissions, deceptions, and then something incredible happened. Rather than anger or condemnation, they began to laugh. Softly at first, hesitantly, but soon the laughter spread, rippling through the entire square. It was then I understood. My song hadn't just exposed Landro's lies. It had transformed the people. As the crowd gradually calmed, I stood on the ground, watching people embrace and laugh, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from their shoulders. My heart, however, was filled with contradictions. I should have felt triumphant, but instead I was overwhelmed by a deep sense of emptiness. I knew I had done something significant, yet I also realized that this world I had entered from the bird civilization was far from ready for such a change. The song of truth had brought liberation, but with it came pain. The pain of shattered illusions that had once allowed people to exist in the reality they knew. I glanced over at Anna. Her tear-filled eyes revealed the storm of emotions she was fighting to control. Her father, the man in whom she had placed all her hopes, had turned out to be someone she never truly knew. But in her, I saw not just disappointment, I sensed a new resolve. I knew that for Anna, this moment would mark the beginning of her own journey toward truth. As I spread my wings, I felt the currents of air lift me, carrying me into the sky. Once again, the flight restored the lightness I had lost in this foreign world. In the land of birds, everything was simpler. There, no one had to pretend. No one had to hide their true feelings. But here, in the human world, deception seemed not only necessary, it had become an inseparable part of life. Could they ever learn to live without lies, as the birds had? The crowd slowly dispersed, and the noise faded. I decided to stay with Joshua, though deep down I still longed for the bird world. I promised myself I wouldn't flee back to it. This world, with all its imperfections, needed change. If I could bring even the smallest spark of light, I knew I had to stay. In the days, weeks, and months that followed, I continued to sing. People came to hear me, and slowly their hearts and their lives began to change. After Landro's fall, a new figure emerged onto the political stage, Emma Rohn, a woman destined to lead a movement for change. Emma was honest and sincere. Her speeches ignited the hearts of the people, and soon she won the election, becoming the symbol of a new era. Meanwhile, my life with Joshua unfolded naturally. Our love blossomed with each passing year. We were now free to travel the world, performing concerts and sharing our songs with millions. In every city where we performed, people became a little kinder. The series of albums we recorded together told the stories of birds. Over time, life on Earth began to change. The world, inspired by the mystical bird songs and stories, gradually rid itself of wars and violence. Dictators lost their power, crime rates declined, and human greed and malice became increasingly rare. Joshua and I became parents, and our children grew up in this new, bright world. We moved to Jambia, the land of my ancestors, where peace and harmony had long been restored. I watched as the world became a better place, but at the same time, I sensed that not everyone was ready for change. Groups of people who rejected my songs began calling themselves anti-birds. These people formed secret societies and started monitoring me and my family. They watched every step I took, waiting for an opportunity to strike. One day, I made a mistake. In a conversation with Joshua, I mentioned the portal in the bird tree, an ancient passage to the land of birds where I once studied under the wisest beings. I thought it was safe to share, but I didn't know that the anti-birds had long placed listening devices nearby. Upon learning about the portal, they began preparing for an attack. When my family and I passed through the portal and returned to the land of birds, I was still unaware that my secret had been exposed and that danger was already at our doorstep. In the land of birds, everything seemed as peaceful as ever. We lived happily, my songs continued to resonate, and Joshua, inspired by musical discoveries, created new instruments that mimicked the melodies of the birds. Our children, growing up between two worlds, human and bird, absorbed the wisdom of both civilizations. But the world beyond the land of birds remained unsettled. The anti-birds believed that harmony threatened their established way of life. And then one day they invaded the land of birds through the portal. They were convinced that their technology would allow them to conquer the ancient bird civilization and exploit their knowledge for their own gain. However, their expectations were not met. The birds, possessing not only wisdom but also a deep understanding of human nature, easily stopped the invaders. A flash of white light engulfed the anti-birds, turning their weapons to dust. The birds surrounded them with a force field, preventing them from moving or harming themselves or others. But instead of punishing them, the birds made a decision to teach them. They created a special island, surrounded by energy fields, from which the anti-birds could not escape. Each day, the birds patiently taught them the art of awareness and self-development. It was a long process, but slowly, the anti-birds began to change. Through introspection and inner work, they came to realize that true strength lay not in destruction, but in creation. When they returned to Earth after many years of learning, they were no longer the same. Now they carried the knowledge and wisdom gained in the land of birds, and they began to share these teachings with the world. The world began to change even faster. Conflicts and wars became rare. My family, Joshua, and our children continued to live in love, watching as the world grew brighter with each passing year. We kept making music, and our children, raised at the intersection of two worlds, prepared to become the bridge between humanity and the birds. Someday, humanity would become part of the great universal civilization, where music and truth would resonate in every soul, just as my songs once transformed the earth.